So the format of today's session will be a Q&A between Frank and Kieran, and we'll also be taking questions from the floor. So feel free to write your questions in the chat, and I'll be able to pass these on to Kieran and Frank during their conversation. We'll also have an additional 10 minutes at the end, which will be more of an open format for Q&A. So if you've got other questions, you can save them till the end. This webinar is a precursor to the Price of Football online course, which will start on August the 30th. It's a 6-week online course with live sessions from Kieran and Frank and other leading industry experts. If you want to find out more, then please head to www.sportstalentnetwork.com. Frank, Kieran, without further ado, over to you.
Thanks, Tom, and hello, Kieran. Kieran, are you as excited as I am about the online course?
Yes, I am, Frank. Football finance has never been more in the news than it is today. We're recording this at 8 p.m. Central European time. I've already done a dozen interviews today from media sources from as diverse as CNN, Chinese broadcasting, Turkish broadcasting, the BBC, various European outlets, The Times, Bloomberg, Forbes, and so on. It is a subject which entices people, excites people, and I think the opportunity to give people some knowledge which they can use to further their careers if they want to move into the sports into the sports world, or in any form of understanding of broad financial issues, but with a sporting slant. I think this is quite exciting stuff.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to it, Kieran, to be together with you on the course. And on the course, we'll be looking at the money flow between games stakeholders. And now, Kieran, we are both football finance lecturers. How important do you think that financial understanding is to the different roles within the sports organization? Or in other words, how would it benefit a club's marketing or ticketing department if they had a solid grasp of finance?
I don't think it matters which industry you're in. An understanding of finance is critical because you're involved in a decision-making process. So when it comes to football, and football is the sport that we love most of all. I mean, I love most sports. If you're involved in ticketing, if you're regularly getting 3,000 tickets which aren't selling, then we've got to look at pricing. But if we cut our prices by 10%, is that going to increase revenues? If we're bringing out some new merchandise, what's going to be the price point? We saw PSG last night launch the Lionel Messi PSG shirt with 30 on the back at 110 euros. They sold 150,000 copies in 7 minutes. Yeah. Did they, in fact, that seemed to me to be a high price. Was it high enough? They could have generated more. With football itself, an awful lot of clubs within Europe are losing money. So why are they losing money? Is it because they're not good at maximizing their revenues, or is it because they're not good enough at controlling their costs? So having an understanding as to coming up with solutions and making decisions, I think that can enhance your career. Football clubs don't want to they don't want to recruit people who say, I'm a huge football fan, give me a job. They want people who can add value to the business. And you can only add value if you've got an understanding of finance and knowing what the implications of the numbers are. Let's say that we're hosting a big club this weekend. Should we therefore open a pop-up shop in the middle of town? Well, we work out how much rent's going to take. We're going to have to work out how many staff we take on, work out our expected units that we're going to be selling. And that's going to tell you whether it's going to make a profit or a loss. If you can come up with the answers to those questions when they're given to you by your chief executive, you get a reputation for being good. And football is an industry where everybody talks and a lot of people listen as well. And that could be very beneficial.
Yeah, I fully agree, Kieran. It's my experience as well in the finance, in multinational companies, whatever department you work in. The more you know about the numbers, the more you know about how your company is doing economically, the more understanding you have of the numbers, the better, and the better negotiation you can go into if you have to negotiate with partners. No, now today I'd like to talk with you about some of the stakeholders in the football ecosystem and the new trends that currently exist. First, maybe for everybody here, most of you know that already, but could you remind us of the club's biggest revenue streams and the stakeholders involved? And then we can go into more
Certainly. Football, in many regards, is a dumb industry because, you know, if you are Apple, you are selling iPhones 364 days a year. If you're a supermarket, you're open at least 6 days a week. A football club is open 30 times a year in terms of its major abilities to generate revenue. So therefore, what we have is an industry which has got costs being incurred all the time, but the revenue sources have to be really honed. And those three main revenue sources in terms of core revenue sources are broadcasting, to which a large extent that's outside of the control of individual clubs, because that's negotiated centrally by UEFA or La Liga or the Premier League with the broadcast partners. And then you as a club receive money based on a formula. You then have match day income. It's your ticket sales. Well, how do we work out the revenue from those ticket sales? It's the average price multiplied by the number of tickets you have to sell, multiplied by the number extra 5,000 seats onto our ground. How much is it going to cost us? How much additional revenue is that going to bring in? Can we sell more matches? You know, one of the reasons behind Super League, which we might talk about in more depth later, is that Super League guaranteed the clubs involved a certain number of matches a year. They didn't have to win, they didn't have to qualify for Super League, but they knew that they were going to get, you know, another dozen home games a season, and therefore they could work that out on their average take. You know, for a club such as Barcelona or Manchester United or Bayern Munich, yeah, we're probably talking somewhere in the region of €6 to €7 million per match. So guaranteeing matches is one way of guaranteeing income. So those are the first two. And the third one is commercial income. And here I think clubs have the most opportunity to grow, because you're not constrained by the size of a stadium. You're not constrained by a TV company negotiating with an organization such as La Liga or UEFA. You can go and sign these deals yourself. So commercial income, sponsorship, marketing of the products, intellectual property. We're now moving into the space of crypto. You know, can we be selling NFTs? You know, there's some very exciting prospects there, but they come with a risk. Those are the three main areas that we would be focusing on from the club's perspective. And player trading is now seen as a revenue source by some clubs when they hold huge numbers of young men, not as footballers, but as commodities purely to buy and sell.
Yeah, great, Kieran. You mentioned broadcasting as the first one. Now, within the broadcasting, we've seen the rise in streaming platforms, the DAZNs, Amazons, 11s of this world. Now, only today, I read an article that about Amazon. They have agreed a streaming pass deal for the French league. I would not be surprised if Messi's move to PSG has something to do with this. La Liga as well, talking about its own streaming platform. So my question would be, what is driving this, and why haven't traditional broadcasters been able to monopolize this industry? Also, I would like to ask you, what kind of jobs exist in this sector, and how important is, again, finance as a good background to move into this sector?
Well, as far as the streaming companies are concerned, football is another product. They have the movies, they have the box sets and so on. They have the comedy concerts. But what they have known, they've done their analysis, and they've seen, as far as traditional broadcasters are concerned, that having the football rights is the golden ticket, the one thing that stops people cutting the cord, the one thing that stops people deciding, well, I need to constrain my personal financial budget. What should I get rid of? Is live football, because it is a communal event, because it is something that you can be watching the match, and at the same time you'll be in a WhatsApp group with your friends who might be watching the match elsewhere, and you can communicate in real time. And there's very little else around, because you can't do that if you're watching Game of Thrones, because people watch it at different times. So football also has the element of uncertainty, which makes it very attractive. And in most leagues, there's some element of sporting balance as well. So it's attractive to the broadcasters, especially these new broadcasters, because it delivers eyeballs. And ultimately, that's what they are buying and selling. And many of those eyeballs are in respect of people that don't watch traditional broadcasting using traditional means. They will watch football on their phone, on their tablet, on their laptop, rather than people in my generation. I want to watch it on a 60-inch screen because I'm old and my eyesight's not that good. The idea of watching football on a phone doesn't attract me. But if I'm young, if I'm energetic, I'm more likely to want to watch football, to pick it up via DAZN or Amazon Prime or these particular delivery methods. And therefore, it's the broadcasters like it. From the point of view of a consumer, it has an attraction because you can watch it on the move, because of the standard of we're now in a 5G environment. And from the club's point of view, and also the leagues, they know that the broadcasters are making profits from broadcasting football. Well, why not make those profits ourselves? Why not have Net La Liga? Why not have Net Prem for the Premier League? Why allow somebody else, a middleman, to take out a proportion of the money that's generated from broadcasting and keep it for themselves, for these giant corporations? If we can, as football organizations, deliver the platform ourselves, there will be a market for it. There will be some outsourcing of production, but you can concentrate a greater proportion of the profits made from football by having it as a vertically integrated product coming direct from UEFA, La Liga, Premier League, Ligue 1, Bundesliga, and so on.
Yeah, please, Kieran.
Yeah, and then in terms of jobs, there are jobs in broadcasting. I teach. I think people know I'm a teacher at the University of Liverpool. Well, we regularly have people enroll on courses from the broadcasters, because they want to get a greater understanding not only of the finances of the sport, but how those finances impact them as broadcasters. Have they overpaid? Is there a genuine threat coming from alternative mediums of broadcasting? How can they maximize their take in terms of the way that they deliver sports? Can they fracture the market? Can they sell it off in chunks? Is there a future for augmented reality, virtual reality, where instead of going to the match comes to us, and we're sitting, but we're thinking we're sitting in the dugout alongside Pep? How much are fans willing to pay extra for that particularly immersive experience? Because with the changes in technology, that will be on offer. It might be a success, it might be a failure, we don't know. But the broadcasters are very keen, because they fear, the traditional broadcasters, they fear the rise of the streaming services, and therefore they want to keep one step ahead. Having a knowledge of finance helps them to make better decisions, just as it does within the football industry itself.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kieran. I'm sure there will be some questions from the audience on that. But to move on to the second, let's say, revenue stream, and we're talking about commercial income, sponsorship deals, merchandising, etc. Now, how has COVID impacted these traditional forms of sponsorship, and what are the new trends within this sector at this moment?
Well, I think we can probably summarize that up with what we've seen happen in Milan. Yeah, when I think of an Inter shirt, I think of Pirelli. It's a fantastic partnership. That partnership's just ended. Why has it ended? Well, people aren't buying tyres anymore because they're not driving, because they're not allowed out of their houses as a result of COVID. And as a consequence, that particular sponsorship deal has been replaced with Sokios. Sokios are a fan token organization. They are, the fact that they are prepared to pay millions of euro to have their products linked to a club such as Inter is pretty astounding. But it is a sign of the confidence of some of the new industries that are being created, and also the idea of creating new relationships between these industries, which are, they are abstract, I think, for many people of an older generation such as mine. But I speak to people in the crypto space, in the token space, and they certainly see an opportunity within football to enhance engagement. To give you an example, Manchester United claim to have 1,100 million fans in the world, but their revenue in a non-COVID year is probably around about 750 million euro. So they're making 70 euro per fan per year. Now, is there any way that we can engage, perhaps using technology, perhaps using commercial relationships to turn that 75 cents per year into €1 or €2? And if that happens, all of a sudden, Manchester United's revenues go through the roof.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, there will be new forms of fan engagement. We're looking at this digital transformation a lot of clubs are initiating and really trying to create a new revenue stream here as well through the digital world. Now, what jobs do you think would exist in this sector? And have you had maybe former students as well that moved into this space?
I think in terms of the jobs that you can be operating on either side of that negotiating table. From the club's point of view, do you have experience? And certainly here in Liverpool, we've had students who have moved on to work, first of all, with the clubs in the city in terms of short internships, but also to move to other clubs within English football and international football as well, taking their knowledge of marketing, taking their knowledge of finance and the importance of getting value for when they are negotiating on behalf of a commercial partner, and being able to quantify that value as well. So there certainly are jobs in this sector, and a good commercial director for a football club is worth their weight in gold, because if they know when to blink, if they know when to concede, but when they know that they are in a strong position in a negotiating situation, is absolutely critical, because that will deliver additional euro, additional dollars, additional sterling to the club, which can then be invested in what all the fans are focusing on, which is, of course, what's happening on the pitch.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now let's move on to the next subject, Kieran. Recently, we've seen the entry of private investment firms into the market. We all read about CVC Capital Partners negotiating a deal with La Liga, Redbird Capital with a stake in Fenway Sports Group, Liverpool owners with a stake in Toulouse, Malaga, and only a few weeks ago, and that was very amazing news as well, with a minority stake in a T20 cricket team in India, a huge market. So actually, during the course that we are going to initiate end of August, we'll be talking to Daniel Martin. He's the VP of Finance and Corporate Development at Redbird Capital, and we'll be talking about these very interesting issues. Now, why are these companies entering the football industry now? And are they only looking for stakes, or can they play another role, resolving temporary cash flow problems of clubs, for instance? So what is your take on that?
Ultimately, a private equity company is looking for a return for its investors. Why is it so keen to enter the football space? I think there's a view that as far as US sports franchises concerned, they are maxed out in terms of price. There was a report from Forbes earlier this week, which was saying that the average value of an NFL team is now around about €3 billion. Well, if I can buy a Premier League football club or a La Liga club for 100 million euro or 200 million, that's a substantial discount. I think there's also a feeling within the private equity, within the private investor space, that football clubs still are run too inefficiently. And if they can introduce more up-to-date business practices, they can, first of all, maximize revenues, as we've just been talking about. And secondly, they can have some form of better cost control. We've seen the problems that Barcelona have had, which have manifested it themselves in the last 48 hours with Lionel Messi leaving. Well, ultimately, that was due to absolutely appalling cost control from the hierarchy at Barcelona. And the price which has been paid is the loss of, in my view, the greatest player that the world's ever known. And I'm old enough to remember Pele. I'm old enough to remember Maradona. And I'm Team Messi rather than Team Cristiano. So I think that's the benefit. These organizations, they are looking for a return, but they are also prepared to be patient. So in the short term, they would be willing to provide working capital required by clubs. They feel that they can monetize that and get that money back plus extras over a period of time. And I think they're prepared to be patient. They're certainly willing to look at other sports because we've seen in rugby, which is a minority sport, as we know, we've seen the rise of private equity come into that in the last few months. I think it will be very interesting over the course of the rest of the year what happens in terms of La Liga and CVC, given that Italy and German clubs have rejected overtures from that private equity industry, but also I think it's very noticeable that the price willing to be paid for La Liga is far in excess of what was originally offered to Serie A.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Kieran and Frank. So I'm just going to interject because you just mentioned Barcelona were particularly inefficient when it comes to spending their money, but Farhan would like to know who is the most, or which is the most efficient club, or which are the most efficient clubs when it comes to clubs using the club's resources?
I think those clubs that have adopted an analytical approach to recruitment and retention of players, and also those clubs which have been able to offer a pathway to young players have reaped the rewards. So I think Dortmund are a classic example. We've only got to see the way that they have spotted players. They've been willing to offer players not just the opportunity to be part of the club, but to be part of the first team of that club. And therefore, the likes of Sancho and Haaland have been recruited on relatively low fees and can be sold at a vast multiple of that. In terms of the Premier League, if you talk to people who are associated with the data analytics side of things, they would say that the three clubs who, in their opinion, are most efficient at understanding data and being able to see value in players, which hasn't been seen before, have been Liverpool, Manchester City, and Leicester City. Now, those three clubs have won the Premier League over the course of the last 5 years, and I'm sure that the two things are connected. So those type of clubs, I would say, have done spectacularly well. I think the problem that Barcelona have had is that as a result of having a presidential model, the one thing you want to do if you want to be elected as president is to promise people exciting things. Well, what's more exciting than 150 million euro recruitment of Philippe Coutinho or Griezmann or Dembele? And if you think about the total money that's been spent on those players, well, they're failures. They've not delivered. The fact that Coutinho went out on loan to Bayern so quickly is indicative of he was simply a means of getting somebody a job as a club president, and they don't appear to have any long-term strategy. So it's essential that clubs, to be efficient and to answer the question, they can offer players a pathway, but they also are constantly looking to recruit young players with a view to moving them on to make a profit in future years, because they can't compete necessarily with some of the clubs that have more of a global following.
Yeah. I don't know if you have any more questions, Tom. If not, I would like to ask you a tricky question to Kieran here, actually. Kieran, if you had unlimited amounts of cash, what would you invest in? Would you invest in youth academies? Would you invest in digitalization, sustainability? Where would you put your money?
I would put my money in data.
In data.
Yeah, if we take a look at what we are seeing, so in England we've just seen Brentford FC being promoted to the Premier League. It's the 50th team to ever played in the Premier League, and their owner is a data analyst, and he has used his knowledge and his understanding of data to allow that club, which is a very modest club in terms of its resources, to punch above its weight and end up in the Premier League. We've just seen Manchester City recruit as head of its analytics team a person who is an astrophysicist and who previously has been advising governments in terms of their space policy, and he's now being recruited to involve in football. So that's where my money would go, because what I'm looking to do, if I've got unlimited amounts of cash, is to add value to that cash through recruitment and retention of stars.
Yeah, I mean, indeed. I mean, also one of the partners of Redbird Capital is the guy that we've seen in Moneyball behind the data analytics. So, I mean, indeed, data is information is money, So, and now, I don't know, Tom, if you have another question. I saw another question coming up about Football Club Barcelona, but my question related to Football Club Barcelona and what happened.
Sorry, Frank. Yeah, I was going to say Martin Thompson, who was asking about Barcelona, if it would be possible for that club to go into administration.
If I was the local bank manager who is responsible for Barcelona's bank account, the one thing I would try to prevent most of all is to allow that club to go into administration, because everybody's going to blame the bank. And two things are going to happen. First of all of the Barcelona fans, if let's say that bank is Santander, all of the Barcelona fans are going to say, well, Santander is the bank that closed by Barcelona, but we're going to take our money elsewhere. And secondly, you're going to be the most unpopular man in town. You're going to be more unpopular than Florentino Perez in Barcelona, and that takes some doing. And therefore, your life is going to be in misery. I did an investigation into a club here in England, and I recommended that they did go into administration. And the bank manager says, if that happens, I will have to move out of this city. So I don't think that will be the case. Barcelona, we all say, it says itself, it is more than a club. We often say, could it be too big to fail? Well, not necessarily. We said the same about Lehman Brothers in New York, and that proved to be wrong. But I still think it's highly unlikely. There will be some form of restructuring. There will be pain potentially for a few years for Barcelona, because what will happen is that it will have to reduce its ongoing costs. We've already effectively got the club at war with a significant number of players. They're trying to force them out. They're trying to force through pay cuts. And the players have said, well, we've signed a contract. We've got a commitment from you, and you're not honouring it. So I think it's going to be a tough time for Barcelona. But do I think administration? I just think it's too unlikely. There will be somebody somewhere willing to provide some form of credit to enable it to survive. But it's going to be a very painful experience. What's happened in terms of Barcelona's spending over the past few years is that everybody's been having a great party, and the trouble is, after every great party, there's a great hangover, and there's an awful lot to be cleared up, and it's going to take a long time to clear up the mess.
Now, indeed, Kieran, I mean, we're going to talk a lot about Football Club Barcelona and their financial statements in the course, where we're going to analyze all the numbers over the last year, and also we will have some latest information on what Barcelona is going to publish soon as the numbers for 2021. So we're going to go into a lot of detail there. So I see there's more questions coming in. If not, I have to move on to a next subject. Tom?
Yeah, I think we move on, Frank, and then these other questions we can include that for the 10-minute Q&A afterwards.
Okay. to make sure that we can cover everything, I would like to move on to our next subject. Another revenue stream, Kieran, is the European competitions, with the Champions League generating for some of the big clubs over 100 million revenue in a season. And there, of course, we see this new Conference League being introduced by UEFA. Can you tell us a bit more about the Conference League and how the small clubs will be able to benefit from this new competition?
Well, I think we're still awaiting an element of clarity from UEFA. Under the present arrangement, from the seasons that we've just had, the 32 clubs in the Champions League shared 78% of the revenue generated from the TV deals negotiated by UEFA, and the 40 clubs in the Europa League, they shared 22%. Now, I suspect what's going to happen is that the Champions League clubs are not going to be willing to give up very much of their money. So what we will now see is a distribution of that 22% of the revenue between the 64 clubs, 32 of which will be in the conference and 32 will be in the Champions League, in the Europa League. So the money from prizes, I think, will be modest, but it will still, I think, for the smaller nations in Europe, the likes of, say, Poland or Slovakia, and so on. First of all, it gives their clubs an opportunity to play in Europe, which they wouldn't necessarily have managed to organise under the existing regime. It spreads the opportunity. And therefore some money will flow through, whilst that money will be relatively small compared to the riches of the Champions League, compared to the domestic TV deals in respect of some of these countries. It could be noticeable. The winners of the Europa League would normally expect to get somewhere in the region of 30 to 35 million euros, perhaps 40 million euros in a good year, depending on the country that they're from. So as far as the Europa League is concerned, I guess that we're probably talking somewhere in the region of 10 to 15 for a winner. That can certainly move the dial for a club.
Mm-hmm. Okay. It's a very complex, let's say, league, the Conference League. A lot of people still struggling to understand, but okay, we will know more about it when it starts, very soon in September. Now, if Tom has no more questions on this subject, I would like to move on to the last one, and then we can have a Q&A about 10 minutes for further questions. And it's a subject that, of course, everybody likes to talk about. It's an important generator of cash, at least for some of the clubs, not for Football Club Barcelona, and that's player trading, okay? We know a lot of young people have the ambition to work in the business of the football agencies, and as a lecturer in sports, I also have this question from all of my students: what do I have to do to get into this agency business? What is your perspective on this, and how complex is it, in your view, to realize this dream for young people?
Yeah, everybody thinks Raiola, everybody thinks Mendes, everybody thinks Jonathan Barnett. They see the money being made, and it's a strange industry in the sense that at present, although FIFA might change that in due course, it's an industry where there's no barriers to entry, except being good, and this is where the issues arise. Now, there's an awful lot of criticism of football agents. Some of that is warranted, but some of that is not. I mean, how many players do we hear criticizing their agents or their former agents? Very, very few. Most players are quite happy to delegate the responsibility for negotiating contracts, for negotiating intellectual property rights, to somebody that has experience in these particular fields and who can generate additional money for the player, him or herself. So it is an industry which I think is intriguing. It's a case of being mentor, counselor, PA, problem solver for your client, and we see different agencies offering different levels of service. It's also an industry which is perhaps guilty at times of undue amounts of nepotism, in the sense that quite often we are seeing members of the player's family deciding to act as agents. And if my father or my brother or my cousin says, I'd like to be your agent, you can see the appeal of that from a family point of view. Whether that individual has enough knowledge of law, finance, intellectual property rights, and so on to negotiate the best deal for the player is uncertain. But if the player ultimately is happy because they feel that they're looking after their family as well, then perhaps the player will be happy to sacrifice some income for themselves with the knowledge that they are making, they are doing what's best for their broader family.
Yeah, great.
How difficult is it to realize that dream? It's tough because, as we say, there's no barriers to entry, and anybody can call themselves an intermediary. Here in the UK, all that I have to do is to write out a check for around about €600, and I become an intermediary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know about that. This is a real problem. Now, we will be talking about agents as well in the course. So it's a subject that is on the list as well. Now, we would like to touch on many more trends in the football industry. We are limited in time, but we would like to talk about the rise of women's football, the growing awareness around sustainability in football, revenue diversification, initiated by clubs to innovation and digital transformation. Many subjects, but that's maybe for a later occasion. I would now like to give the audience the opportunity to talk to Kieran and ask some personal questions here. I see we have some questions, Tom.
Yeah, we certainly do. So guys, quick reminder, I've already got 3 questions in the chat, but if you do have any other questions, then feel free to write them there. Or if not, I think you can even put your hand up through the reactions button, and then I can always unmute you. At this stage, just a reminder that you'll find Frank and Kieran on the Price of Football online course, which starts on August the 30th of this month. We'll have live sessions similar to what we've had today, for 2 hours a week on two separate days, plus a lot of other material. Head to sportstalentnetwork.com to find out more. Okay, guys, so Q&A time. First of all, we had one, I think I'm going back to, we've had quite a few in now, actually. Martin Smith. May I check how Man City are the most efficient club? They have unlimited resources and spend hundreds of millions on first team and academy players. So how are Man City efficient, Kieran?
Well, they are efficient because they've turned that spending ultimately into trophies. And whilst they've suffered financial losses, they measure success in terms of the ability to make that trophy cabinet bigger and bigger each year. So do I think they're as efficient as the likes of Dortmund? Do they offer 17, 18, 19-year-olds the same pathway? No, I don't. But they found Phil Foden. They kept Phil Foden. In doing so, that's a player who is worth, I think, probably more than Jack Grealish in today's market. And there are other players coming through as well. Whilst they do have unlimited resources, theoretically, it's noticeable that the owners have not put money themselves into Manchester City now for quite a few years. And with the exception of their 2020 accounts, in the 3 to 4 years prior to that, the club was breaking even. So it wasn't necessarily having the highest wage bill in English football, although that was the case in 2020. But in the previous years, it was Manchester United. Now, Manchester United haven't delivered in terms of trophies, although it could be argued that their academic pathway with the likes of Rashford coming through and Greenwood and McTominay is actually better than Manchester City's. So, I'm just passing on what I hear from people in the game itself. City are very, very keen these days to have an interchangeable squad. The fact that they won the Premier League so easily without a striker, which is a phenomenal achievement, regardless of whether people like them or not. It's a strange club. I think, as from a neutral's perspective, is it a club that's easy to love? No, it's not, because people will point to the wealth of the owners. but that wealth is not coming in from the owners anymore. It is effectively being self-generated on the vast majority of cases.
Okay, thank you. So staying on the topic of clubs backed by nation states, I've got a couple of questions that are on the same subject. One from Peter, who's asking if there is a risk that Barca get picked up by a nation state wanting to sports wash, as he says, because they're desperate for money. So is that a possibility? And then Sophia Fernandez was also asking, what is the impact of being backed by a nation state compared to not being backed by a nation state? Is this going to become prevalent in the English Premier League? We've obviously seen Saudi Arabia trying to do something with Newcastle. So yeah, I thought I'd combine both of those questions.
Okay. Barcelona need cash. They are owned by its members. The problem is, if you ask all of the members for cash, some will say, well, we can't do it. And some will say we can. It makes it very difficult. If we compare that to the likes of Manchester City, PSG, also potentially Chelsea, in the sense that they're owned by an ultra high net worth individual, what happens is as follows. They phone up the boss and the boss says, here's a check for 250 million euro, cash flow problem solved. So that's the advantage of being owned by whether it's an individual or whether it is effective state-owned clubs. Is it likely to happen at Barcelona? I think highly unlikely, because Frank, you're much closer to Barcelona than I am, but in terms of the culture of the club and the culture of the fan base, they love the fact that they see themselves as being fan-owned and being independent. And I think it will be very, very difficult for them to want to give that up. The Catalan mentality is, we are Barca. The idea of being Barca owned by Saudi Arabia or Oman or another country, I think would annoy the fans and upset the fans to such an extent that they would rather see Barcelona drop out of La Liga and go into the second division for a couple of years and come back stronger.
Yeah, let's not forget, Kieran, that Barca was almost the only elite club in the world without shirt sponsor for many years. UNICEF, they were paying to have UNICEF on the shirt. And it was only at a certain point of time when people realized that the club needed extra money that it was voted positive to have a shirt sponsor. But that took a long time, So it's indeed not going to happen, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, thank you. So actually, I'm going to ask Frank on that point. Is it even possible, given
No.
the ownership? It's not even possible, right, for Barcelona to be bought.
We will talk about that in the course as well. It's not possible.
Okay, good stuff. So Peter was asking on the subject of player representation. He was asking if the PFA should do more to be the negotiator for players instead of agents. Peter works in the public sector in Denmark, and it's the union rep who decides or does the wage negotiations. And they said that there are many upsides to that. So should the PFA do more to protect players?
Well, I also work in the public sector, and my union negotiates on my behalf as a person that works in education. But I get get paid the same as every other lecturer. What's different in football is that you are not negotiating on behalf of a team. You're negotiating on behalf of an individual because of the nature of fixed term contracts and registration fees and transfer fees. So therefore, should the PFA do more? The reason why the PFA don't represent more players, when I talk to players, they say, we believe that our agent can do a better job on our behalf, and they don't necessarily feel that the PFA can represent them and can extract maximum value from the club itself. So it simply comes down to a player's choice. They're fully aware of the opportunities to use the resources of the PFA, and for players who are perhaps younger at smaller clubs, it might work out as a cheaper alternative. But I think for the majority of the players at the senior end of football, because of the unique position that they play in the game. You know, if we look at the Premier League, the average salary of a Premier League player is almost €3 million these days. You know, it's you want somebody just to focus on operating on your behalf and not being trying to negotiate with a few hundred other players at the same time.
Yeah, very interesting. Thanks for that question. And the answer, of course. So I've got a couple more questions, I think both coming from Hugh Cumming, and I like Hugh's questions because they're not your typical. The first one is asking about the importance of having game time at Dortmund. And then he went on to say, having 5 substitutes means so many players often only get 5 minutes a week. Would fewer substitutes improve player value?
In terms of getting your name about, I'm not so sure. I think for star players will be star players regardless. For a player who is trying to get a breakthrough, I think it's actually a very challenging issue because there's 2 options. A, we can move to the 5 substitute environment whereby therefore the clubs have to have bigger squads. But that means that player cannot go out on loan and perhaps be playing 80 or 90 minutes a week for another club, either in the same division or in another country in Europe or in a lower division in that domestic country. So the clubs will normally do what's best for the clubs rather than what's best for the players. And I talk to chief executives and managers, and the broad comments that come back is, if we feel that we have a strong squad, we're actually really keen to allow 5 substitutes because it gives us more flexibility. We've got our sports scientist guys monitoring the players. They know which players are going to be running out of gas on 70 minutes in a particular match. And therefore, it certainly benefits the club. In terms of can you make a name for yourself as an impact substitution with regular 10 or 15 minute appearances, I'm not so sure. You're on mute, Tom.
Thank you very much, Kieran. You can be host next time. So Hugh was also asking about, with more clubs in European football, coming back to the Conference League, it means very small clubs, for example, those in the Faroe Islands, have to travel across Europe for matches. Do they get reimbursed from UEFA for their flights as well as maybe player time off? Or do the club have to finance that themselves?
No, the club normally gets a percentage of the gate receipts, and they will get a fee from UEFA from a match, and out of that they have to pay their own expenses, is my understanding. I was talking earlier today to the chief executive of a club in Jersey, which is one of the islands which is not part of UEFA. And he says it's really tough being an island nation club because the only way that you can persuade other clubs to play against you is to commit to paying their travel expenses. So these clubs can often get a double whammy of they've got high transport costs themselves, and they might have to go and pay the costs of the clubs that they're hosting.
That's food for thought for the Real Madrids and other European Super League members. Maybe they can go and stage the tournament in Jersey and be free from UEFA. Right, okay, I think on to the last one from Byron Chadwick. Very topical. This is on my to watch list. After the Al Jazeera documentary, do you anticipate any changes in the process of buying clubs in English leagues?
I have to be slightly cautious with what I say here because I've been involved in the Al Jazeera documentary since March. I got to see the full transcripts, all of the filming, some of which has not been able to be broadcast for legal reasons, for defamation, unable to prove certain allegations. But in terms of what we have seen, it does appear that perhaps there should be more due diligence taking place on behalf of the seller to make sure that if they are trying to get a new owner in, that they do their homework and then they pass on and they then bring in the football authorities at a later stage. I mean, some of the content of the Al Jazeera documentary in the form of false passports for prospective owners to hide identities, to hide criminal records, the use of trusts as a means of disguising ownership were very alarming. And it does indicate that football as an industry is attractive to people whose intentions are not honourable.
Yeah, certainly. Okay, I think we've got time for just one more then, which is coming from Sophia Fernandez again. Thank you, Sophia. Regarding monetizing fan engagement, we see a lot of clubs sign up for things like socios. Do you think that there is a moral line for how much money clubs should try to extract out of their loyal fan base, especially with schemes linked to financial risk, crypto, or no guaranteed fan benefit, for example, high membership fees like Leeds? As a Liverpool fan that has to pay 35 quid a year with zero possibility of getting a ticket, I'm very grateful for your question, Sophia. Kieran?
Yeah, I think this is a very sensitive issue. How I think the link from tokens to crypto to gambling is a very easy one. Is the use of tokens, especially if they're going to be sold to children, is that a pathway to gambling, which I would not want my football club to be associated with? So it's certainly something which I feel needs to be regulated or monitored by the football authorities, because I think they have been criticised with some legitimacy with the uncomfortably close relationship between the sport and the gambling industry. The fact that these organisations are unregulated can easily see them go out of business. We saw that in England in the case of Football Index, and Football Index was sponsoring 2 football clubs at the time. A lot of people have lost a lot of money. So I think one of the good things about the crypto market theoretically is that it is a community-based approach. The trouble is you're never quite sure whether the people in your community are good or bad.
Yeah, that's true. You're right. I mean, there is a link between, crypto and gambling. Definitely. I think a lot of people investing in crypto that I know, they've lost a lot of money, having made a lot of money previously. It all just went. So yeah, it is a delicate situation. I was going to close it off there, but actually Abix just asked a great question. He said, do you believe Man United's upcoming fan share scheme has the power to instill some, in brackets, confidence in the ownership and affect the club's finances?
It could result in additional funds for Manchester United. But unfortunately, because of the nature of the share scheme at Manchester United, where the A shares carry 10 votes each and the B shares, which will be the ones which will be put on offer to fans, are likely to be worth only 1 vote each, in my view, it's going to be more smoke and mirrors than actual democratization of the club. And the promises made by the Glazers effectively go as far as saying, we commit ourselves to 1 Zoom conversation a year, where you will come on as fans, you will complain about X, Y, and Z. We will say, we're very sorry to hear that. We will look into it, and probably not very much will happen. You're on mute again.
I'm muted again, but yeah, I was saying how interesting that was. Thank you, Kieran. So I think we're going to bring it to a close there, guys. We're out of time, but thank you so much, Kieran, for your participation today. And again, your incredible knowledge of the beautiful game. Kieran, so Frank as well, thanks to you. And importantly to all of our audience who have asked some brilliant questions. Another reminder, guys, that there is the Price of Football online course. For more information, head to sportstalentnetwork.com, where you have all the information about the course. And of course, you can sign up. Brilliant. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for the invite.
Thanks, Kieran. Thanks, Tom.
Cool.
Thank you, Tom.
Cheers.
Bye.
What I might do is first of all stop